Lawyers, what's a law that isn't real that normal people insist exists? It's a law that exists but widely misunderstood is the concept of entrapment. If the police put a bait vehicle in a high-crime area, that is not entrapment. If the police are watching a bar known to overserve to see if there are impaired drivers at the end of the night, that is not entrapment. Entrapment only occurs when a government agent suggests committing a crime that you were not otherwise going to commit. This actually happened to an old high school teacher of mine. He thought he was going on a date with a lady he met online. When they met up for the date, who happened to be an undercover officer, she was like, "I'm not really interested in a date, but for money I'll do blank," to which he obliged. He was charged with soliciting a prostitute, but the charges were dropped since he was only actually interested in the date and had no desire to solicit anything until the officer brought it up. That is exactly the classic scenario that the law is written to prevent. And whoever that officer was should have been disciplined. That is textbook violation of rights. I'm surprised they even try to do stings that way. People that think it's illegal to be videotaped in a public space. I saw someone on Nextdoor complaining about my reasonable right to privacy in a public space when someone was shaming 20 standing together waiting for takeout. Sorry, that's the opposite of how it works. If big-time celebrities can't stop paparazzi from following them and their family 24/7, I have no clue why ordinary people believe that they have the right not to be caught on camera in public. I'm honestly surprised that more celebrities don't hire people to follow the paparazzi themselves around and make their lives as annoying as possible. Things like standing in front of their shots or following them to the doctor's office and then demanding to know why they were there. I'd 100% watch a TV show where especially obnoxious paparazzi were followed around for months and harassed in the same way they harass others. Paralegal. A lot of people think that the law requires you to be a good, decent person. If I'm sitting on a bench and see a blind person about to walk into the path of a bus, it's completely legal for me, in the United States, to remain silent, take my cell phone out, and take a video of his death. It's even legal for me to profit from the video. I'd be a monster for doing it, but there's no law imposing a duty on me to tell this stranger, watch out for that bus. You should never tell a blind guy to watch out for a bus. Listen out for that bus. Don't try this in France, though. There is something called Non assistance à personne en danger, Article 223-6 Code Pénal, which translates to failure to assist a person in danger. 75,000 euros and 5 years in jail. It's federal law in the U.S. that a plainclothes or undercover police officer has to identify themselves as law enforcement if asked. No, it's not the law, and they can tell you whatever the F they want. I'm reminded of that Breaking Bad cold open where Badger gets arrested for selling product to an undercover officer because of the exact made-up law, LOL. They can do drugs to prove they aren't a cop too. An undercover cop went to court to get his rehab for cocaine covered by workers' comp. It was covered. The sad thing about that is he had to take it to court. Probate attorney here. I've had many people ask me when the reading of the will is going to take place. I explain to them that only happens in movies. But one of these days, I'm going to have one and hire a mysterious blonde wearing a veil to sit in the corner quietly. Then I'll tell everyone that she inherits everything. Provided, of course, that she must adopt the descendant's cute but troublemaking 6-year-old child no one knew about. Or she can spend the night in a haunted house. Her choice. My dad's spent his whole career doing probate and can't count how many people have inquired about the reading of the will. I believe on a couple of occasions he's actually staged them because it was the only way to get the whole family to come sit down in a room and actually listen to what the effing will says. And why not to do it if he can bill the estate for the hours it takes him to clean up the conference room and then read a piece of paper at a bunch of morons. LMAO, 10 out of 10 move. There will now be a requirement for such a mysterious lady's presence at the reading of my will written into my will, along with a handful of burly yet solemn fellows dressed in stereotypical G-man attire, complete with sunglasses and earpieces. One will be Russian, or at least able to fake the accent consistently, and should only be curtly acknowledged by the others. Every one of them should be entirely vague about how they knew me except from business. And the men should all refuse to acknowledge the presence of the veiled women and feign terror if compelled to look at her. An arrest isn't magically invalidated if the police don't read your rights on the spot. There could be a whole thread of just misconceptions people have from watching cop TV. Miranda rights prevent you from self-incrimination when being questioned by the police for a crime. It doesn't mean they have to Miranda you the second you get arrested. If you aren't questioned, then it doesn't apply. People also think it's illegal not to let them make a phone call after being arrested. Came here to mention the one phone call misconception. They don't have to let you call anyone as long as they give you reasonable access to a lawyer. That's why I love in The Dark Knight when the Joker says, "I want my phone call," and the cop ignores him because that's exactly what they would do. Not Americans, but why can they do this? Why can't you at least inform your spouse or something that you're alive? Or at least, if they are afraid you tell them something you are not supposed to, tell them themselves. The one that is the most frustrating to me, even though it's not really a specific claim that a particular law exists, more a rule of evidence, is "that's just hearsay, you have no evidence." Comes up all the time in all kinds of contexts. Even lawyers love using it when it suits them. Nothing but hearsay and speculation. Usually what people mean when they say that is, don't believe them, they're lying, which, fair enough, but that's not what hearsay means. Lots of evidence is just a person talking. That's what a witness is. It's why testimony exists. It's not evidence just because it's a person talking. Hearsay just means that in most cases, you cannot have person A say that person B said XYZ in order to prove that XYZ actually is true. Hearsay, get it? A heard B say it. It just means your witness can only talk about things they actually know. And, extremely important, it also doesn't count as hearsay when person B is actually the person on the other side of the case. Person A is totally allowed to say, "Person B told me, yes, I will commit the crime on Tuesday," if person B is the defendant who has been accused of committing the crime on Tuesday. You don't get to complain it's hearsay if you're the one who supposedly said the thing they heard. This should be higher. People don't seem to be aware that a single person testifying about what they saw happened can often be decisive evidence on its own. Until the development of photography and video cameras, witness testimony was one of the highest forms of evidence possible to provide. Leaving no witnesses was more important before the days of CCTV. With the recent advent of deepfakes, it's possible we may end up returning to a world where witness testimony is regarded more highly than video evidence. Man, I don't even want to think about what deepfakes could end up doing to the rules of evidence. My father, who is a lawyer. Policemen cannot lie to you. This is false. They can, and they do. Edit. There's so many replies that I cannot even find some of the ones I'd like to respond to, so I will leave a general note for those who have asked for a reference. Frazier v. Cupp is the Supreme Court ruling that affirmed the legality of deception interrogation tactics in 1969. The ruling is still active. I heard you were smuggling animals. Why, are you a cop? No laws against driving barefoot. Mandatory edition in the U.S. In Germany, while appropriate footwear is not directly required, you can be found at fault if your choice of footwear or lack thereof leads to your inability to avert an accident. I believe it's the same in Australia. If you have an accident while wearing flip-flops, you might struggle with insurance to prove that wearing them didn't cause or add to the cause of the accident. Saw this and immediately went to Google to disprove, but you're absolutely right. I've been told this my entire life and always thought it was dumb. The reasoning everyone always told me was because the vibrations from the pedals would make your foot fall asleep or go numb so you wouldn't have as much control. Even though I know so many people who drive barefoot and have never heard one of them say that their foot fell asleep. In California, it's not illegal to discuss your wages with your coworkers despite what your boss might say. Edit. I'm a lawyer in California. I assume it's the same in the other 49 states, but don't want to speculate. It's actually not illegal anywhere in the United States to discuss wages or form/join a union, contrary to what many employers may claim. I also strongly recommend you do both to protect yourself and your colleagues from being taken advantage of. Edit. As many commenters have noted, it's not only completely legal to unionize and/or discuss wages, but it's actually illegal for a company to attempt to prohibit either. And being fired for unionizing or for discussing wages is grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit. Know your rights, don't get screwed over. And I'm not sure if this is state by state or countrywide, but in some or all of the US, it's actually illegal for employers to try and prohibit it. It's actually illegal nationally for a company to retaliate for discussing wages. They typically just make up some other BS reason to fire you instead. Driving with interior overhead car lights on is not illegal. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. My first. Your mom told you that was illegal when you were a kid too, huh? When you were a dad? In the UK, that it is illegal to drink under the age of 18. You can buy alcohol with a meal at 16, beer, wine, cider, and you are not breaking any laws if you give your child some alcohol in the privacy of your own home and they are over the age of 5. Edit. At 16, you have to be accompanied by an adult and it is paid for by the adult. Thanks, you/Kalusk. You can buy alcohol with a meal, but do restaurants have final say as to whether or not they'll serve it? Yes. The restaurant chain I used to work at wouldn't sell alcohol to anyone under 18, even if it was just one beer to have with a meal. Probably a good choice, to be honest. Used to hate it when a bunch of 18-year-olds would hire out my place's function room for a birthday party. Utter carnage. Sovereign citizen stuff. I feel like enough folks have claimed to be sovereign citizens that it's become normal. But no, generally you can't declare yourself exempt from the laws in effect where you are. My first job while in school was as a law clerk was to respond to pro se writs of habeas corpus from prisoners. One of the first ones I was given was to respond to a guy that claimed he was falsely imprisoned because he had sovereign immunity. He had changed his name to Jesus Christ and claimed that because he was the sovereign, he was not subject to our laws anymore and needed to be released. I remember being very flummoxed on how to respond. I spent entirely too much time on that reply. This feels like the kind of thing they would hand to someone as prank/hazing. Old loony Jesus is locked up again. Let's give that one to the new clerk to break him or her in. Exactly. There were lots of drivel ones like that were hard to respond to because they were just incoherent. Some prisoners had filed dozens of crazy writs. Edit. I don't know if it's true and I never saw it, thank Jesus, but someone claimed a prisoner had filed one written on dirty underwear. Shortly after I started, one of the real lawyers was fired because he wasn't doing anything. Me and another clerk got the job to clean out his office. We looked in his file cabinet and there were 300 writs that he had just crammed in there and didn't respond to at all. A team of us had to respond to them for the rest of the summer. I guess all the crazy talk had driven him crazy. The lawyer's name was, let's say, Jones. To this day, when my friend from that time gets something we don't want to do, we suggest putting it in the Jones filing system. In the UK, it's not illegal to park on someone else's driveway. It's classified as trespassing, a civil offense, not criminal, which means the police can't do anything. This particularly surprises people, as many think that they have exclusive rights to the parking outside their house as well. What recourse do you have? In my old London borough, you phone the council and they guaranteed to turn up in an hour and tow it away, no questions asked. So long as you can prove you live there and it's across/in your property and you don't want it there, they tow it and charge the owner for recovery. It's not the same everywhere, but because it's only a civil matter, you can just have it towed away yourself and charge the owner for recovery and storage. If nothing else, it's fly tipping. If you're asked about someone parking on the driveway, then you can remove or have removed that vehicle to a legal parking area, but to ensure or no damage is caused to that vehicle whilst moving it. If you're asked about blocking someone's driveway so they can't get onto the road, only works that way, doesn't matter if you can't get onto your drive, then the police can remove it. But it will not be a priority for them, and it will no doubt take some time before this is actioned. The local council parking enforcement may also assist. U.S. ex-lawyer here. There is no law that requires the police to provide you with their name and badge number when asked. There may be internal policies, but it's not the law. There's also no law that requires the police to get a supervisor if demanded. Again, policy versus law. There is no law that allows you to question whether an order given by the police is lawful or not. A court has to decide if the order was lawful after the fact. But there are laws to punish you if you do not comply. Edit. Wow, this blew up. Thanks for the good conversation in gold. Truly honored. Quick updates. Someone pointed out that in New York there's a law that requires cops to ID themselves and have a card, which is fantastic. Thank you for correcting the statement. A lot of folks seem to be concerned that no law meant no rules, so to clarify, a lot of things are actually managed via internal policies. Those policies usually have teeth, so no, the police are not interested in just violating them and losing their jobs, etc. Last note. Thanks for the civil discourse. A lot of these threads get reduced to flames quickly, and by far the comments have been productive and thought-provoking. You guys really are awesome. I've tried to respond to questions and will continue to as long as you think it's useful. Thanks again. So what method is there, if any, to confirm an officer's identity? Asking because I live in a high-trafficking area that has multiple instances of people being abducted by fake cops in unmarked vehicles. And the common advice around here is to ask for their badge number before even rolling down your window fully. Now that I think of it, anyone with half a brain could figure out how to make up an accurate-sounding badge number, though. Edit. This comment now has twice as many likes as my top actual post. Always knew that I would beat the old record, but definitely not talking about something this dark, lol. I called dispatch and asked them to radio the officer. When I hear myself on the radio, I know he is legit. Police generally hate me for this. I just tell them to wait while I confirm their identity. During high school, we had a police officer come into our past to talk about driving laws. He spent 10 minutes talking about how you should confirm an officer's identity when you get pulled over. There apparently was an issue of people impersonating officers, especially on the mountain roads where there weren't a lot of people. This isn't exactly what you're asking for, but I think it's valuable for people to know. You do not need to wait 24 hours to report someone is missing. I would hope not, since every cop drama I've ever watched says the first 48 hours are the most important. If someone has to wait 24 hours, they lost 24 hours of that 48. The crazy thing is that they say it on actual true crime shows. Like, don't spread that misinformation. Also, if an adult is missing, a good first step is to call 311 and see if they've been arrested. 3 times in my life now, someone has gone missing or they never came home, and it turns out they were in jail. Negligent motorcycle driver forced me to hit him from behind with my car. I was young and naive at the time, never been in an accident until then. Guy makes me sign a paper that says that the accident is my fault because I hit him from behind and wanted compensation. I explained the situation to my dad, and he concluded that the guy was obstructing normal traffic and I had no option but to hit him from behind in the particular circumstance. The guy ended up taking us to court, showed the judge the piece of paper that I signed. I explained that I signed it under duress and that he explained that, by law, whoever hits from behind is responsible for the accident. Judge looked him in the eye and asked him if that's true. He said yes. Then she asked him to point out which law states that. He just shut the F up. F that guy. Although it usually is the case that the person is at fault, you are correct, it isn't always the case. Reminds me of something that happened with my mom. She was at a junction waiting to turn into a main road. The junction was on a slope. She hadn't engaged the handbrake properly and rolled backwards into the car behind her. There was a little bit of damage, but she knew she was at fault and gave the other person her insurance and contact details. She never heard from them. We reckon they thought the insurance would see it as their fault and decided to just pay for the minor damages themselves. I'm no lawyer, but I don't feel like most of the villains in Scooby-Doo committed any actual crime. I don't think it's against the law to put on a mask and scare some trespassers on your own property. What if there's an abandoned gold mine underneath it? I think it would still belong to the property owner. What if the entrance to the mine is on somebody else's property, but the gold is under yours? You can go 10 over the speed limit. My dad thought this was true, and he was new to the country and quickly found out by a speeding ticket that it was not. Edit. I'm now realizing that this may vary from state to state and country to country. For my case, South Florida generally tolerates 10 over, but is still technically illegal. This comes from the margin of error of speed radars. They have a 5-mile margin of error normally, and thus people feel it's safe to go 5 over. If you're only going 5 over and get a ticket, you should contest it and make sure to ask when the gun was last calibrated. Yeah, that's what my dad told me as well. He was ticketed in the 2000s, late 90s, but that was an isolated incident. South Florida drivers normally go 10 over, and cops do so as well. As long as you're not holding up traffic or going blazing through the streets, you are fine. Good Samaritan laws aren't nearly as broad as people think. For context, I work in emergency services. Some people believe that "I was trying to help" are the magic words that can get them out of any sticky situation. Edit. Good Sam laws vary by country and state, and the medical examples are a little more black and white than others. Adding a non-medical example of what I'm talking about, imagine you're driving your car and notice someone on the side of the road who needs help. As you swerve off the road to provide assistance to this person in need, you incidentally run over a child on the sidewalk. After the situation is over, you're definitely not free from the consequences of running over the child with your car just because you had good intentions of helping someone else. Versions of that story have occurred, and the drivers have tried to use a Good Samaritan defense because they meant well. There is absolutely some gray area on the subject, but if your unprompted action undoubtedly makes the situation worse than if you'd done nothing, having good intentions is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, and a bunch of people don't understand that concept. When I moved to Okinawa as a teenager in the 90s, Dad in the Marines, we were told that if someone got in an accident off base, that we shouldn't help them since we could be sued or go to jail if that person died. I believe this is no longer the case in Japan, but as an Eagle Scout back then, it just blew my mind that I shouldn't give CPR to someone in need. It really bothered me, and I told myself that I would still do the right thing if something happened. Fortunately, never had to find out if I would have held it to that. that might have been based on an old Japanese tradition that when you save someone, they owe you their life, and it's a debt they'll never be able to pay back, so you make them lose face. For that reason, there used to not be an obligation to help someone in distress in Japanese law. Saving someone wasn't forbidden, though. That has changed, and you're now supposed to try and help when you see someone in distress. In China, attempting to help a person is seen as an admission of guilt, so people don't help. Even though many people think so, there has actually never been a Danish law allowing you to beat up a Swede with a stick if he should walk across the ice on Øresund during winter. But even though the law has never existed, it doesn't mean it shouldn't. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.